The broadcast widened, showing ships mobilizing, alliances murmuring. Fear spreads faster than truth, and Varkin knew it. Until the princesses returned, Varkin declared, all human space is under investigation. Any resistance will be treated as guilt. The message ended. The screens went dark. For a long moment, no one spoke. Outside the mountain shelter, the earth kept turning, unaware it had just been named an enemy. Celia looked at Ethan, fear and resolve mixing in her eyes. I wanted to live, she said, but now living may cost you everything. Ethan met her gaze, without hesitation. Then we will decide the cost together, he said. Far beyond Earth, fleets began to move, and the joke that started as mockery had become a spark, one that would soon set the galaxy on fire, blue and quiet, like it did not understand the storm forming around it. But the storm was real, and it had names, flags, and guns. After Varkin's broadcast, alien ships began to arrive in layers. First a few, then dozens, then a wide ring of cold metal around the planet. They called it an inspection, but their formation was a siege. Human satellites tracked them. Human radios listened. Human leaders argued in rooms full of fear and pride. In the hidden shelter, Ethan watched the live feed in silence. Celia sat beside him, one hand resting on her abdomen as if to remind herself that this was not a dream. Mira stood behind them with a folder full of hard proof and a face full of worry. They are outgunning us by a wide margin, Mira said, but outgunned does not mean helpless. Ethan nodded. He had spent his life in systems where you survived by thinking faster than the problem. Now, the whole planet had to do the same. Human officials prepared a formal response. They broadcast evidence to the Coalition's command channel. Not insults, not threats, only facts. They showed the poison data. Slow acting, court signature. They showed the blocker implant in a sealed case. Still stained, still real. They showed attack logs from the facility. Time stamps, camera footage, broken drones. They even showed the moment Celia saw the Royal Guard armor on the kill leader. That single image held more truth than 1,000 speeches, because it proved the palace had sent death, not rescue. For a moment, the Coalition channel stayed quiet. Ethan held his breath without realizing it. Celia's eyes narrowed, waiting for the knife. Then Varkun's voice cut through the silence like a smooth blade. He appeared on the Coalition broadcast with practiced calm. He smiled as if he was the victim. These so-called proofs are human tricks, Varkin said. A stage performance for weak minds. A desperate attempt to hide their crimes. The Coalition commanders shifted, uncertain. Some were hungry for truth. Some were hungry for favor. Propaganda was an old weapon, and it still worked. Varkin continued. Humans do not understand our biology, he said. That device is counterfeit. That poison is fabrication. Celia's stomach turned, not from pregnancy, from rage. They lie with a straight face, she whispered. They always have. On the edge of the broadcast frame, Celia noticed something else. A court elder who refused to meet the camera. A guard who looked away too quickly. Small signs that fear lived inside the palace too. Keth was not in the shelter anymore. He had vanished days earlier, slipping into the cracks between worlds. He carried a mission that could get him executed in public. He moved through back channels and old favors. Through ports where paper money still mattered and cameras did not. Through neutral stations where nobody asked questions as long as you paid. Keth had stolen court files. Not rumors, not stories. Real sealed records with royal marks. Records that showed the blocker program, the false testing orders, the approved poison signatures. He sent them out piece by piece to neutral worlds, to trade guilds, to medical councils, to treaty courts that still cared about evidence. Every transmission was a risk, and every risk pushed him closer to a death sentence. In the shelter, a private message finally arrived, encrypted and short, like a soldier's heartbeat. Files leaked to neutrals, Varkin panicking. Kill team orders traced to inner court. Expect interception if you travel. Ethan read it twice, then looked at Celia. Celia's face was pale but steady. She had been hunted long enough to recognize a narrowing trap. They will not stop, Celia said. They cannot, Mira answered. Not if that child exists. The child was the center of everything now. Proof that the mark was a lie. Proof that sabotage failed. Proof that Varkun's power was built on fraud. Celia rose slowly, as if her body was heavy, but her decision was light. I will return, she said, not asked as a question, stated as a command to her own fate. Myra's eyes widened. Celia, you are pregnant, she said. They will try to kill you the moment you step on their soil. Celia's voice stayed calm, but it carried iron. If I hide, I become their story, she said. If I return, I become the truth. Ethan stepped in front of her, not blocking, only standing with her. You are not going alone, he said. Celia's eyes flickered. They will call you my owner, she said. They will call you thief. They will call you monster. Ethan nodded once. Let them, he said. I am not going as your owner. I am going as a witness. Mira exhaled hard. She hated this plan because it was dangerous, and she respected it because it was necessary. Plans formed fast after that. Humans prepared a small diplomatic ship, unarmed in appearance but layered with defensive systems. A medical bay for Celia. A sealed evidence vault for the implant, poison, and logs. Human leaders argued again. Some wanted to surrender Celia to avoid war. Others wanted to fight. Ethan watched from the sidelines, and it sickened him how quickly people traded a person for comfort. Celia heard those debates too, and instead of breaking, she stood taller. This is why I will speak, she said, so they cannot pretend ignorance. Before departure, Ethan sat with Celia in the shelter's small kitchen. A simple table, warm light, a bowl of plain food. The kind of normal scene that felt precious, because it might be the last. Celia looked at the steaming cup in her hands. I do not understand your world, she said, but I understand one thing. Ethan waited. Celia lifted her eyes. You choose, she said. You choose to protect even when it costs you. Ethan's voice softened. We are not perfect, he said, but we try. Celia nodded. In my empire, trying is weakness, she said. Here, trying feels like strength. They left before sunrise, a small human ship lifting into sky that looked peaceful from below. Far above, the alien coalition ring tightened like a fist. Strange messages came through as they climbed. Some neutral worlds, sending quiet support. Some warning them to turn back. Some begging them to surrender, to keep trade routes open. Keth sent one more message as they cleared the atmosphere. Varkin has authorized intercept. Do not trust coalition escort codes. If you see a gold crest, it is not rescue. Ethan read it and felt cold. Gold crest meant inner palace authority, meaning the same people who branded Celia. As the ship reached the edge of Earth space, a larger shadow slid into their path. An alien fleet, not the full coalition, but a fast strike group positioned like a net. They did not open with fire. They opened with polite words. Human vessel, a voice said, calm and false. Reduce speed for inspection. Comply and no harm will follow. Myra's hands tightened on the console. Ethan's eyes stayed on the screen. Celia's breath shortened because she knew the shape of a trap when she saw one. They want to board, Myra whispered. And if they board, Ethan said, they take her, and the evidence disappears. Celia sat in the medical chair with a safety strap across her chest. Her face was calm, but her eyes were on fire. Do not stop, she said. Ethan made his decision in a single heartbeat. He did not answer the inspection call. He pushed the ship into a hard burn. The human ship darted forward, engines screaming silently through vacuum. The alien fleet reacted instantly, like predators. A beam grazed the ship's side. Systems flickered. Warnings flashed. Mira shouted coordinates. Ethan corrected course. The ship slipped toward a narrow path between two interceptors. For a moment, it looked like they might break through. Then the alien fleet launched something small, fast, almost invisible. A disruptor dart. It struck the human ship near the rear thrusters. No explosion, just a sudden deadening. Lights dimmed, screens glitched. Ethan's hands tightened on controls that stopped responding. Myra's voice rose in panic. Power drop, she said. Navigation failing. Celia felt the ship shudder and understood. This was not a warning. This was capture. The last thing Ethan saw clearly was a gold crest on the nearest interceptor, bright and clean, like a royal stamp. Then the human ship's main screen went black. Silence filled the cabin, thick and sharp. And somewhere in that darkness, Celia realized the galaxy had finally closed its hand around them. The human ship did not explode. It was taken. Lights returned slowly, like a cruel sunrise, one system at a time. Ethan woke with a headache and a bitter taste in his mouth. His wrists were bound with soft restraints that still felt like an insult. Across from him, Mira was conscious, breathing fast, eyes scanning the room. Celia sat upright in the medical chair. Her face was calm, but her eyes were not. They carried a deep, controlled fury. A thin field collar rested around her neck, not choking, but limiting movement and signals. Outside the small holding chamber, alien voices spoke in clipped tones. No shouting, no panic. Only the careful sounds of people who believed they owned the ending. Keth appeared at the doorway for a brief second. He looked bruised and exhausted, armor scratched, but his eyes were alive. "They intercepted you," Keth whispered quickly. "I tried to warn neutral escorts, but Varkun placed his own fleet in the path. We are being taken to the capital world." Ethan pulled against the restraints once, testing. "They will kill her," Ethan said. Keth's jaw tightened. "Not yet," Keth answered. "They want a public. They want her death to look like justice." The capital world rose beneath them hours later, a planet of pale stone and sharp geometry. Its cities looked like frozen waves carved from marble. As the shuttle descended, Celia stared through the small viewing slit. She did not look homesick. She looked like someone returning to a crime scene. The doors opened into a long hall that smelled of polished stone and cold incense. Walls were tall and white, marked with gold lines that showed the history of the royal line. Guards stood at perfect distance, silent, watching with eyes that did not blink. Ethan walked beside Celia, flanked by 2 guards on each side. He kept his hands visible, posture controlled, not because he feared them, but because he refused to become their excuse. When Celia entered the central court chamber, the air changed. It became thicker with judgment. The room was enormous, a dome of light and stone, filled with nobles seated like statues. Whispers rippled through the crowd like poison. Ethan heard translated words through a small device Mira had managed to keep. Human pet. Failed princess. Shame mark. Celia did not flinch. She walked forward as if she still owned the floor. But Ethan saw her fingers curl once, just once, around the edge of her sleeve. At the highest platform stood Regent Varkun. His armor was ceremonial, black and gold, designed to look like authority itself. He smiled down at Celia with the calm cruelty of a man who thought he had already won. "Princess Celia," Varkun said, voice echoing, "you return at last. And you bring your human." The nobles laughed softly, not loud, not wild, the laughter of people trained to enjoy humiliation as entertainment. Varkun lifted a hand, and the court fell quiet again. "Speak," he said. "Explain your betrayal." Celia stepped forward until she stood under the central light. The light did not flatter, it revealed. She raised her left wrist, bare and steady. The court mark showed clearly. Infertile, burned into her flesh like a public sentence. A hush rolled across the chamber. Then fresh whispers followed, sharper. "She dares show it." "Still marked. Still useless." Celia's voice was clear. "This mark is a lie," she said. "A lie made by those who feared my bloodline." Varkun tilted his head, pretending patience. "A lie," he repeated. "And you bring human toys as proof." Mira stepped forward with the sealed case, her face hard. She placed the case on the evidence platform. Inside sat the tiny implant, dark and silent. "This was inside her body," Mira said, translated cleanly. "A blocker device. Court manufactured." The elders leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Varkun's smile did not leave, but it tightened at the corners. Celia lifted another container, poison sample logs. "Court-made poison," she said, "slow enough to hide, strong enough to erase me without noise." Then Ethan held up a damaged piece of armor, plating recovered from the kill team. The piece carried a crest, half scratched but visible. Royal Guard. A ripple moved through the room, because that crest did not belong in any rescue story. It belonged in a murder story. Varkin finally stepped forward, voice rising. "This is theater," he said. "She betrayed our blood. She ran to humans and let them corrupt her." Celia's eyes flashed. "Corrupt," she repeated. "Humans saved my life." The nobles hissed softly at that. The idea itself offended them. A lower world saving royalty. Varkun's voice grew sharper. "Look at her," he said, pointing. "Look at how she speaks like them. She is no longer one of us." Celia took a breath. Ethan felt the room waiting like a blade held above a neck. And Celia made a move that changed everything. She placed a hand on her abdomen. Not dramatic, not staged. Just natural, protective, real. Then she spoke the sentence Varkin never planned for. "I carry a child," she said, "and the child lives." The chamber did not just go quiet, it broke. Gasps hit the air like shockwaves. Nobles stood without permission. Elders stiffened. Guards shifted. For a heartbeat, nobody understood. Then the meaning slammed into them. If Celia carried a child, her line was not ended. If her line was not ended, Varkun's claim was fragile. If Varkun's claim was fragile, the whole palace balance could collapse. Varkun's face changed for the first time. His smile cracked, just for a blink. Then he forced it back like a mask. "A false claim," he said quickly, too quickly. "Human manipulation. An illusion to stir sympathy." Celia's voice did not shake. "Then test me," she said, in front of everyone. The crowd roared in whispers now. Not celebration, not anger. Fear. Because fear is what power feels when it hears truth. That was when the assassination attempt began. Not with a shout, but with a small sound like a click. A guard near the side aisle moved wrong. Too smooth. Too fast. Ethan saw it first, because he watched hands. The guard sleeve shifted, revealing a slim blade launcher. It aimed not at Ethan, not at Mira, straight at Celia's torso. Ethan moved without thinking. He crossed the space in a hard sprint. He slammed into Celia's side, turning his body into a shield. A silent projectile hit. It struck Ethan's shoulder instead of Celia's chest. Pain exploded through him, hot and sharp. Mira shouted. Keth drew his weapon and fired. Court guards rushed, but they rushed in confusion, because they did not know who was loyal and who was planted. The chamber erupted into chaos. Nobles screamed. Elders demanded order. 2 more attackers moved through the crowd, aiming for the platform. Keth tackled one, rolling hard across the marble floor. Mira dragged Celia behind the evidence stand. Ethan stayed on his feet even as blood ran down his arm, because if he fell, the shot would come again. He grabbed a fallen guard's stun tool and fired once. One attacker dropped, muscles locked. The other raised a weapon, but hesitated when the crowd saw his crest. And that hesitation was everything, because now the court could see the truth in real time. This was not humans causing trouble. This was the palace trying to erase a witness. Celia stood despite Myra's grip. Her face was pale, but her eyes were blazing. She looked at the nobles, at the elders, at the guards. "Look," Celia shouted, voice cutting through panic. "Look how desperate they are. Look who tries to silence me." Ethan staggered slightly, and Celia grabbed his good arm for balance. That small image hit the crowd harder than any speech. The human was bleeding. The princess was alive. And the human was not holding her like property. He was holding her like a person he refused to let die. Security finally regained control. Attackers restrained. Blood on marble. Varkin stood rigid at the top platform, jaw tight. His perfect story had cracked in public. The elders gathered, whispering among themselves in sharp, urgent tones. They feared war. They feared truth. They feared losing power. But they feared one thing more. A scandal that the whole galaxy could see. The oldest elder raised a staff for silence. The chamber quieted slowly, trembling like a nervous animal. The elder's voice carried authority older than Varkun's armor. "Enough," the elder said. "We will not decide by emotion. We will decide by proof." He looked directly at Celia, then at Ethan, then at the evidence case. "Princess Celia," he declared, "if you claim sabotage, you will prove sabotage. If you claim a child, You will prove the child. The elder's eyes hardened. Until then, he said, you remain under court control. Celia's heart sank, because court control was how people vanished. Ethan tightened his grip and leaned close, voice low. We're still alive, he said. That means we can still win. Celia looked up at the elder platform, then at Varkin. Varkun's eyes met hers with quiet hatred, and she understood the next test would not be fair. It would be a battlefield wearing the shape of law. After the attack, Celia, Ethan, Mira, and Keth were placed under heavy guard. Not the loud kind of guard meant to protect, but the quiet kind meant to control. Ethan's injured shoulder was treated by court medics who did not look him in the eyes. They stitched him like you fix a machine, fast and cold. Celia watched every motion, and she remembered what her empire did to things it considered lesser. The elders announced the final test would happen at dawn. A public medical review by the highest council. No private rooms, no closed doors, because the galaxy was watching now. Outside the palace, coalition ships waited like wolves in orbit. Neutral worlds held their breath. And on distant stations, ordinary people stared at screens, wondering if royalty would crush another truth and call it order. At dawn, Celia walked into the medical chamber under bright white lights. The room was shaped like a circle so no one could hide in corners. Council members stood in pale robes, faces unreadable, hands already prepared to judge. Varkin stood behind a transparent barrier with his advisors. He looked calm again, but his eyes were sharp with desperation. Ethan stood beside Celia, injured but upright, refusing to be separated from the moment that would decide her life. The chief medical counselor spoke, voice formal. We will examine the princess, he said. We will confirm the presence of an implant. We will confirm the status of pregnancy. Celia lifted her chin. She hated the gaze of so many eyes on her body, but she hated silence more. Mira stepped forward and placed the sealed evidence case on the central platform. The tiny blocker implant sat inside like a dead insect, a weapon made to look like fate. The council began their scan. They used machines older than most empires, tuned to the deepest signals of biology. The readings appeared on large screens visible to everyone. At first the chamber was quiet. Then the first result flashed in clear symbols. Manufacture origin, Royal Medical Labs. A murmur swept through the observers. The second result followed, sharper. Installation authorization, inner court signature. Varkun's advisors shifted behind him. Varkin's jaw clenched so hard it looked like stone. But the council had not finished. The chief counselor turned to the poison analysis. He compared it with the Empire's own restricted compounds. Another line appeared on the screen. Compound match, court grade, controlled distribution. The chamber exhaled like a living thing, because the lie was now recorded by the Empire's own tools. Not a human story, not a human trick. Then the council moved to Celia's pregnancy test. Celia's heart pounded, not from fear of motherhood, but fear of what the truth would unleash. Ethan's good hand hovered near her elbow, not holding her, just ready. The scanned beam passed over her abdomen. Numbers built like a rising tide. Then the final confirmation appeared on the screen. Life signal confirmed, developing offspring stable. For half a second there was no sound. Then the chamber exploded into voices. Some gasps, some prayers, some angry curses. The galaxy had been told she was infertile. They had believed the mark, because the mark was law. Now they saw the mark had been a weapon. Celia closed her eyes for one moment. Tears slipped out, quiet and unstoppable. Not weakness, release. The chief counselor raised a hand for silence. His voice cut through the chaos. The princess was sabotaged, he declared. The infertility label was engineered. The implant is court-made. Every screen in the palace transmitted that sentence outward, across ships, across stations, across worlds that had built their politics on the Empire's word. And far away, neutral governments began to shift their stance. Varkin moved before the shock could settle. He stepped forward and spoke loudly, forcing control back into his voice. This changes nothing, he said. She is corrupted. The child is unnatural. Myra's eyes narrowed. Ethan felt anger rise, but he kept his voice steady, because rage was what Varkin wanted. Celia opened her eyes and stared straight at Varkin. You did this to me, she said. You branded me. You tried to kill me. Varkin's smile returned, sharp and dangerous. Then he spoke the words of a man about to burn everything to keep power. Emergency decree, he announced. By Regent authority. The princess is to be contained. The human is to be detained. The evidence is to be seized. Palace guards shifted at his signal. Some stepped forward, weapons ready. Others hesitated, eyes flicking to the public screens, to the council results, to the watching galaxy. This was Varkun's final move. Not law, not justice. A coup wearing the shape of procedure. Keth watched the guard lines carefully. He had lived among them long enough to read fear and loyalty like written text. Then he stepped forward, armor still carrying marks from earlier fights, and his voice rose, clear. Regent Varkun has no authority over truth, Keth said. The chamber froze. Varkun's eyes narrowed. You dare, Varkun said. Keth did not flinch. I dare, he answered, because you used the royal crest to send killers. And I have the orders. At that moment, a new broadcast cut into palace systems. It was human, clean and sharp. Ethan recognized Myra's signature style, facts arranged like a blade. Keth's leaked court files appeared on public feeds. Orders, signatures, implant program records, poison approvals, kill team deployment schedules, and messages that proved the assassination attempt had been planned before Celia even left the Empire. Neutral worlds received the full data package at the same time. Humans had sent it out through diplomatic channels, not as threats, but as verified evidence. The strategy was simple. If power lies, then show the lie to everyone, and let the lie collapse under its own weight. Varkun tried to speak over it, but the room no longer listened. Guards began to split. One line moved with Varkun. Another line moved away from him, weapons lowering, hands shaking, choosing honor over fear. Ethan saw a young guard remove his helmet, face pale, eyes wet. He looked at Celia's wrist mark, then at the screen, then at Varkun, and he stepped back from the regent's side. That small step became a flood. More guards pulled away. More weapons lowered. More voices rose in protest. Varkun's advisors reached for hidden comm devices. Keth shot one device with a stunned bolt, crisp and controlled. Enough, Keth said. No more shadows. The elders stood in a tight group, faces stern. They had protected the system for centuries. But even they could see the system had turned into a knife aimed at its own people. The oldest elder raised his staff again. Regent Varkun is suspended, the elder declared, by council authority, pending judgment for sabotage and unlawful killings. Varkun's face twisted. This time the mask fully broke. You will regret this, he hissed. You will all regret this. He tried to trigger the emergency guards anyway, but the command did not obey, because Keth had already cut the line, and half the guards had already turned. Celia stepped forward into the center light. Her voice carried, steady and strong. She did not shout. She did not beg. I was sent as a joke, she said. I was sent to be erased. I returned with truth. She turned slightly, placing her hand on her abdomen again. And I returned with life, she added. A quiet wave moved through the chamber, softer now, not fear, but wonder. Celia looked toward Ethan, then back to the elders. I do not want revenge, she said. I want reform. No child will ever be marked like this again. The elders exchanged looks. They were old, slow to change. But the galaxy was watching, and the proof was undeniable. Days later, Celia was restored publicly, not as a perfect symbol, but as a living scar that could speak. The court-marked practice was abolished by decree. Medical authority was separated from political control. Royal guards were audited, and oath laws were rewritten. Humans did not demand territory. They did not demand tribute. They demanded only one thing, that a person could not be treated as an object. And the galaxy heard it. Earth's status changed quietly over those weeks, not because humans threatened the coalition, but because humans had shown discipline, restraint, and truth under pressure. Neutral worlds began calling Earth not weak, but stubborn, not primitive, but principled. And in a galaxy built on power games, that was a kind of strength most empires feared. When the child was born, it happened away from cameras, In a clean, safe medical wing, with warm light, Celia held the baby close, breathing in that new impossible life. Ethan stood beside her, exhausted and smiling, not claiming, not owning, just present. Celia walked later to a balcony that overlooked the capital city. Night lights shimmered across marble like stars trapped on stone. She held the child and stared upward into the real stars beyond. She had been thrown away like trash. Now she stood as proof that truth could return from exile, and that humans, of all beings, could be the ones who refused to play the cruel game. Far beyond the reach of the Empire, past known lanes and safe maps, a deep space sensor grid older than most civilizations caught a strange signal, a pulse that matched no known pattern. Not fully human, not fully Celia species. An ancient system woke, something that had been sleeping for ages. Its lights turned on one by one like eyes opening in the dark, and somewhere in that silent distance, a voice that was not a voice began to count. Not words, not threats, only a simple cold recognition. The hybrid has been born.